Greetings and salutations, dear viewers, and welcome back once again to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV, where today we're going to be tackling a new challenge. Last time we took care of the 2 new dungeons added to the Expert Roulette. Today we're taking on the 24-man challenge, the Void Ark. The 24-man challenge, a 24-man raid, Void Ark, actually consists of... It's very similar to Crystal Tower, which we encountered before, which it plays much like a slightly longer regular dungeon, only you've got 24 people in there to juggle the mechanics. In turn, the fight is generally mechanically simpler than regular dungeons, where you can rely on a smaller, closer group of people to handle them. The rewards for beating this are reasonably high-level gear. I believe it's item level 185? No, that can't be right. 205? Or is it 195? I don't know. I'm currently showcasing it, though. That's the monk set of it. You can get 1 piece of this equipment a week. Also, once a week, you get a fletching, which you can turn in for an item that lets you upgrade the 200 equipment to 210. So that's my introduction to Void Ark. Let's skip ahead to when we actually enter. The gear is item level 200, by the way, which actually makes it the equivalent of your unenhanced class gear. So you can actually pick and choose and get a best in slot before upgrading to the 210, which is nice. Though I have a number of pieces of the 210 gear, I just kind of like wearing this, so I'm just going to wear it for a little while. I don't know what it is about Void Ark, but I really enjoy running Void Ark. It was Labyrinth of the Ancients that I actually enjoyed the most out of the Crystal Tower. Circus Tower I didn't enjoy nearly as much. World of Darkness I enjoyed more than Circus Tower, at the very least. But something about Void Ark brings me back to Labyrinth of the Ancients, which I ran just for fun. I didn't even need anything out of it. I just figured, I got 45 minutes to kill, and this is super fun. And Void Ark is just fun. I like it, and I hope they keep that feel going, because I want to keep being this excited. Now, Void Ark takes place on a ark flying through the sky, filled with the voidsent. And whatever that is. You'll periodically notice a fair number of coffins around, specifically on the outside of the Void Ark and more deeper in. Those aren't actually coffins, but instead seal voidsent. Now, the very first thing you'll encounter here is a number of these Anzus. They're generally not that big a threat. They have a conal AoE to be wary of, but that aside, take them down as you will. There's 3 of them, so you can split the groups up, attack the one that you would associate with your group, left to right, A, B, C, for your alliance, which you can see we are in Alliance B. You can't actually see the B listed anywhere, but you can see... Oh no, you can see the B. They're off to the left. You can see A and C listed off to the right. Once the Anzus are dead, the next area opens up and you can move on to the Cloud Larkers here. They're all Chimera-looking things. Or not Chimera-looking, Griffin-looking enemies. They have a front directional AoE, but that aside, again, nothing much to deal with. This part of the dungeon really just kind of getting you used to working with other people. because maybe it's been a while since you did a 24-man raid. Haven't done World of Darkness in a while. Hop in this air chute so you can get shot down to beneath where we started. The ceiling above us is actually the floor that we started this area on. And once you run up this ramp, you can turn around and actually see where we started. The large gap here prevented us from going through otherwise, and I've always wondered why we couldn't just jump down there. We've made far larger jumps in the past. So this part starts with 2 Hybodus and a fair number of Hydro Spirits. The Hydro Spirits are just little elementals. They don't do terribly much. I think they cast water, and that's about it. But there are a fair number of them. Whereas the Hybos there take a fair bit more of a beating. But still, for the most part, there's not a lot to worry about here. With them dead, the Void Manta will break through the roof. He's destroying his own ship. And ready himself as your first major boss. Void Ark, as with the other 24-man raids, is divided up into three segments, each with Trash Pull and a boss, and then all 3 of those segments are ended with another boss. So you get Trash Boss, Trash Boss, Trash Boss, Boss. This is our first official boss. He has a number of attacks at his disposal, Body Slam being one of them. You generally always want to stay at least somewhat close to this boss, because he has a couple attacks that you need to run away from him for, and a couple that you need to be closer to him for. He also has a rear AoE, which you can see there, and can drop those water bubbles down. The water bubble will appear over a player's head, however, the player can move, and the bubble will not follow you. There is no excuse for getting hit by those bubbles. When the bubble lands, it'll do initial impact damage, and it'll also leave a splotch of water on the ground, which if you step in, you'll be inflicted with the Dropsy effect, which is a rather strong water dot. He summoned a couple of ads there. Those ads, I stand in here just to showcase the debuff very briefly. The ads that he summoned were, he's actually summoning them again, the Hydrodus as we've seen them, Hybodus as we saw them before. No, these are actually different from before. I'll get to the other ones later. These guys all need to be killed to end this phase of the fight. They don't do anything terribly dramatic on their own. They're the same as the ones we fought outside. However, you'll see this green target appear over various people's heads. You can consider this training, because this is effectively a slow-motion dive bomb. When he starts his attack, he will move slowly towards wherever that reticule is. However, if the reticule moves, he will not continue to follow it. He will move in a straight line until he reaches the edge of the arena, at which point he will target someone else and chase them. Once all the ads are dead, and a couple more will spawn midway through, he'll do Body Slam again, and this one time you want to get inside him. And from this point on, you will want to be sure to stay near him. The only ads we've seen thus far are the ads that I didn't have the chance to explain, which I believe are the pups, which, when spawned, you'll see a directional AoE tied to a player. There's a reasonably long cast time. You can kill them before the attack goes off. I've not, in fact, seen the attack go off, so I couldn't tell you how bad it is. There's also then raid-wide water AoE. You want to stand away from him. You want to not stand in the Dropsy. The fight gets more and more chaotic as time goes on, but for the most part, it's not that bad. He's also got, as you just saw there, a directional attack forward that should be hitting only the tank. And then we're back once again to the pups. You can see the directional AoEs go out. This one's latched onto me, so I just run up, kill that one, and now I know I'm not going to be hit by it. Don't stand in AoEs. I would try to focus on the pup that is actually focused on you, just to be safe. Now again, a reminder here, when he slams, get near him because he'll do one of two attacks. He'll either do that one where you want to step away, or the one where you need to get in close. So standing just on that edge, probably a good idea. And then we're back to the fight as it was. There's only one real mechanic left in the fight, and he's getting low enough now he should be using it soon. But otherwise, we're simply taking our time and whittling him down. You can see he's doing Body Slam again. Body Slam will always be followed by one of those two attacks. So I get near him, so I can jump inside and be ready to hit him. I'm sure there may be some actual pattern to know what he's going to do when, but I don't know. His final move. He'll summon a Hydro Core in the middle of the arena. He'll suck in a number of players and spit the rest further out. You can see the Hydro Core in the middle and a few of the other little orbs along the outside. Each one of the ones on the outside adds a stone skin-like effect on the Hydro Core in the middle, making your damage do less. So what you're waiting on is all the teams on the outside to kill the 4 water bubbles on the outside, so you can do more damage to the core on the inside. It's random where you go. You could either get sucked in or spat out. If you're stuck out on the outside, just run around the circle and kill all of the bubbles. If you're stuck in the middle, you'll be taking water damage over time, and you need to kill that core. Well, once you've done that, once you've managed to kill that, I imagine he has some kind of enrage or some such if you don't kill the core in time, but I've not actually seen it happen. But with that, you've actually seen all the mechanics this boss has. From this point, you're just juggling Dropsy and the raid damage and the rear conal and the tank hit and the standards. He should be dead soon enough, though, and then we can move on to our next leg of the Void Arc. We just fought our way along the roof of the Arc, and now is our chance to actually go inside. Quick look at the gear. I don't need it, so I'm going to be passing. In fact, I think I got my loot this week, which was potentially my gloves. I think it was my gloves. We can now head a little bit deeper into the Void Arc. You'll see off to the left side a rotating light that is actually your checkpoint. Once you get to this point, and somebody triggers that, if you die, you can teleport back to that point very quickly. Apparently we've got somebody who decided to be AFK, so we're going to kick him. Or not go AFK, but log out. Now this next room can cause a little bit of trouble. It's a circular room, and you see the A mark there. There should be a B and C mark, but nobody decided to put them down. You can also see some moths off to the left and right. Go clockwise. You saw where that A element was. That means A also gets the moth and the pagan's knot clockwise to them. So we're fighting this pagan knot as well as the moth here, and once I turn around, you see where that B marker is the marker we need to pay attention to. So primarily what needs to happen here in this fight is there's a worm and a moth. Once both of these are killed, a Morble will spawn for your group. This will happen for all 3 groups. Once all 3 groups have killed their Morbles, the area is clear and you can move on. The Pagan's Knots are what's going to be causing you most of your trouble in here, and they need to be killed as soon as possible. Because the longer you let them live, when they do die, or if you just don't kill them at all, they will fill the room with poison, which you just saw there. This will stack and will eventually do more damage than you can cure. However, this is very simply solved by killing the Pagan's Knot. Once poison fills the room, you can see right near where the B marker is, a ring appeared. Someone needs to stand on that, and it will trigger the large fan in the middle of the room, which will suck all of the poison out of the air. However, it will disable your button very temporarily, so we can't actually press our button now to fill this, or to remove this poison from the air. What this poison means is that somebody's not doing their job and killing their pagan's not. Now, once you actually kill the moth and the worm, a pagan's vine will spawn. Now, this pagan's vine, it doesn't really do much. It does little more than annoy the person who's trying to kill the pagan's knot. It is a large conal AoE that you'll have to dance around and dodge, but kill the vine, it dies once, it doesn't come back, you don't have to worry about it again. Once the moth and the worm are done, as I mentioned before, the Morble will actually spawn, so you can now kill that one. Each team has one of these, and once all 3 Morbles are dead, the area opens up. We've got so much poison going on, and nobody's killing their dumb knots. So, you know what? Since the other teams have decided not to kill their knots, I'm going to go kill their knots for them. Because I like not dying. I also like it when people pay attention to mechanics. But this is what you're going to get in a Duty Finder. Especially in a larger raid, like a 24-man raid. This is people take this as the opportunity to turn their brain off. They don't pay attention to mechanics. When there's that many people, they always figure, well, somebody else can do the mechanic. Or somebody else will do the mechanic. Please, I beg of you, do the mechanic. I don't care how many people you think there are. Just do it. That would be considered our trash pull before the next boss, though. So we're now encroaching the second boss of Void Ark, who's actually my favorite boss in Void Ark. You can see there another one of the rotating lights. That's our next checkpoint. I don't know what it is that I like so much about this boss. The boss itself is this Irminsul in the middle, as well as Sawtooth, who's walking the outside perimeter. See Sawtooth's tails actually tied to Irminsul in the middle, and they will be working together. I don't know what it is that I like so much about this fight. I think it's just the scale of the fight, and that, like, the fight with Sawtooth over there is, it's like it's a whole different fight. Like, this place is just so big that there's just 2 fights going on at the same time. And they're only tangentially related to each other. So I choose to focus on Irminsul, because I want to be available to kill these Archheads as soon as they spawn. The Archheads need to be killed, because very briefly after they're spawned, you'll see that AoE show up, which is Sawtooth reaching out of the ground and grabbing and eating those gnats. In eating those gnats, he will actually feed that energy back to Irminsul. Is it Irminsul? I'm going to call him Irminsul. Which then has a meter you can see on the right-hand side, which shows Irminsul's development. The higher that development, the more powerful Irminsul is, and the more attacks he has at his disposal. You can see a large AoE that bursts out from Irminsul right around it every now and then. That happens in a reaction to his growth. Later on in the fight, he gains a move called Root Storm that you'll be seeing. And if you're bad enough at this to get Irminsul's development maxed, that's effectively an Enrage, and he spams Root Storm until you die. The other mechanics going on here are, for one, the Archheads here. Despite that they're killed, that AoE is still Sawtooth attempting to eat something. Do not stand in it. or you will be eaten. And you not getting out of the way of that is arguably worse than it eating the Archead. Because not only does it also go towards Irminsul's development, also at about 50%, Sawtooth starts charging up this big raid wipe AoE, but you can get behind Irminsul and that'll completely block it. So just get behind it when you see the thorns, the thorn barrier around Irminsul. But not only does a player being eaten also feed Irminsul, but it takes you out of commission for a minute, and when you're spat back out, you're effectively charmed for a brief moment, and will run around attacking other people. We saw this briefly earlier when the person had the large leafy appendage coming out of their head, which you can see just there off to the right. Other things of note in this fight aside from that, are that Irminsul and Sawtooth will actually periodically trade out a ranged physical and ranged magic intolerance. So you do want to pay attention to, ranged players anyway, want to pay attention to who you can attack and don't be attacking something that's immune to it. They will change periodically though, so you'll want to keep your eye on it on top of that. Another thing we saw was the large green circular AoE that hit a couple people. When this hits you, it will actually tie you to anyone else, because it targets players, a player specifically. It will target the player, or it'll tie the player to anyone else hit by it, which is the large tethers you see connecting various players. These tethers prevent you from moving. However, they can be broken very easily simply by walking through them. If nobody else gets hit by that, there's no one to tether. And you can just run right back in. So if you get targeted by it, get away from other people. So Irminsul has gotten to high enough development now that it's starting to use Root Storm, which it hurts kind of bad. It's not terribly bad, but it's kind of bad. I actually don't have any idea who attacks Sawtooth during this. I always attack Irminsul because more often than not, nobody goes after the Archead. So I want to be in the middle so I can focus on the Archeads. Once Irminsul is dead though, you can go over and focus on Sawtooth, who drops his invulnerability to the one various thing. I don't know if he does something if you don't kill him fast enough. I feel like there would be some kind of enrage where after killing Irminsul, if Sawtooth was left alive for too long, he'd do some big thing to kill everybody. If he does, I've never seen it. Sawtooth himself I can't actually speak much about because I've not seen him much. Primarily the tank grabs him and hauls him off to the edge of the arena, where he's just kind of left there to do his own devices for a little while. Thus ends my favorite fight in here, though, and we move on to our third trash pull. A room filled with coffins. We're now in the belly of the beast, and that is indeed Diablos. He has apparently survived since our fight with him last time in the lost city of Amdapur. Sadly, you don't actually fight Diablos here, but I'm sure we're going to fight him later on. Void Ark is going to end up being something very similar to Crystal Tower previously, where there's going to be multiple parts to it. Granted, we've explored the entirety of Void Ark now, so I don't imagine we're going back into it for the next bit of the story, but we're going to be going somewhere. So the first thing that happens is 3 of these rather large demon dogs spawn. They need to be divvied up and killed by your individual groups. A attacks left, B attacks middle, C attacks right. It'd be really cool if you could get one away from the other one so he's not doing everything right on top of your party. They drop these AoEs down on the ground, which you can see the big purple-red AoE there you don't want to stand in. And also, very early on in the fight, they'll ready an ability called Abyssal Cry. Abyssal Cry can and should be stunned. Or silenced. One of the two. But it needs to be done. I had a group once where none of the 3 parties stopped Abyssal Cry. We got hit by all 3 of them simultaneously, and it wiped us. Like, that killed pretty much everybody but the tanks. Once those are dead, though, the Blackguard will actually come back down, and we get to fight him proper. And while we're fighting him, a number of gargoyles will spawn around the edge of the arena. These things are far enough out, primarily use a long directional AoE. Personally, I think melee should focus on Blackguard, while the ranged DPS take care of the gargoyles around the edge of the arena, just so melee aren't running from one corner of the fight to the other. But that doesn't always happen. So if you see some gargoyles that aren't being dealt with, deal with them. Only a set number of them spawn, and once they're dead, focus on Blackguard. Blackguard himself didn't do anything too terribly fancy, as you saw. And with him dead, we can move on to our 3rd boss. This isn't yet the end, though. This is the end of our 3rd arc, but after this boss, we have one final boss. Now, this coming boss, however, is the most unpleasant boss in all of Void Arc. I always felt like this was unnecessary. Couldn't you just put the conveyance unit back up there so we didn't have to, like, jump to a place just to hit the conveyance unit, just so we could jump again to get somewhere? Like, you could knock the middleman out of that. But our boss is Kuhulain, who you may recall from, I believe it's Nordic mythology, but many also will know from the Persona games, as well as the Shin Megami Tensei games. Doesn't look quite the same. This is perhaps the most unpleasant boss fight in the entirety of Void Arc, though. And if your team is going to wipe anywhere, it's here. You'll note, as soon as the fight goes on, everybody in the arena gets hit with a bleed effect. So the healers are going to have an amount of fun. You'll also notice that rather large spew, whose name escapes me, but when you see him turn around and face the group, readying an ability, don't stand in front of him. It's amazing how many people will just stand there and get hit by that. Add to that, it's continuous. The longer you stand in it, the more you get hit by it. And people will just stand there, getting pounded and pounded and pounded by it, to the point that they've got like stacks of poison and they're dying before they finally go, oh, I should maybe move. Nice job, idiots. Various other moves we've seen was a circular AoE which gets plopped down on the arena. This is why nobody should be standing near those little uprisen pedestals. There are 4 of them around the edge of the arena. Unless the mechanics deem you to, because you don't want that AoE over top of those platforms. Also has a move called Tentacle Flail, which that's all 4 of his tentacles will rise up and smash down on the ground. You are safest directly in front or behind him. You're also safe directly to the sides, but it's a much smaller window. Now, a little ways into the fight, maybe a quarter of the way to a third of the way in, you will summon those idols, which we saw before. Each one of those idols alive added a stack of that bleed debuff to us. So very briefly, we had 5 stacks of that bleed debuff. Focus down one of those idols. When it's killed, your buffs will go, or your debuffs will go down. Once you kill all 4 of them, you should be back to 1 stack of the bleed debuff. Now, when you see Bile below, that's where you need to stand up on these little platforms, and is why you shouldn't stand on them otherwise. Standing in bile below is a quick way to get your face wrecked. And it just makes your job a little bit harder when there's a really large circular AoE over your safe spot. So just don't stand on them. Don't stand near them, unless mechanics tell you to. It's as simple as that, really. Now, Void Pact is probably the move that's going to kill you the most, because people don't understand the urgency of moving these things. 4 enemies will spawn around the edge of the arena, all called Fubar. I would suggest a tank grab one of each, and the DPS grab the last one. That never happens, though. Everybody attack one Fubar, kill it, and your life will go a lot easier. However, you'll also see him ready, the boss himself, ready a move called Beckon. Beckon, it will actually suck in anything in front of him, including one of these Fubars. And if he does, you're going to have a bad time. I forget what exactly happens if you get hit by an AoE. I think the coming AoE, a rather large AoE, will do more damage the more of these are sucked in. And now you can see somebody dropped a circle on top of this one, so I'm going to stand on here with the poison. Thanks. One round of dealing with these Fubars is enough, but it's just so hard to get people to realize the urgency of, hey, this thing showed up, it's standing in it, move it. Once you've killed 2 rounds of the Fubars, though, 8 total, the boss will ready a move called Pestilence. It's a raid-wide AoE, and I believe its damage is based on everything it's ingested up until then. It will immediately follow that with a move called Black Lung. This does not only an amount of raid-wide damage, but it also summons all of these little orbs around the edge of the arena, which I believe will explode and kill you. But you can run into those orbs, explode them locally. It'll do a fair amount of damage to you, but I would wait until you're near full HP before you run into one. This is the only thing that I've ever seen people actually be eager to do. Also of note, we're at the point of the fight where there is now a soft enrage. Because every time the boss uses Black Lung, you gain an additional stack of that bleed debuff we've been carrying throughout this entire fight. Right now, since he used Black Lung once, we have 2 stacks of it. Next time he uses it, we'll have a 3rd stack. And there it is, 3 stacks of the bleed debuff. Everybody's splitting up to go out and ram their faces into these orbs. It hurts a fair bit when you run into it, but I've got second wind, so I feel alright with it, but I would wait until you're near full HP to do it. Our healer is also pretty on the ball in keeping this up, so that's pretty good. Alliance A is having a little more trouble. These are all the mechanics for the fight, though. At this point, it's just a matter of killing it and not dying. With the increasing bleed, as well as the various AoEs you have to dodge around, it's going to get really hard to keep everybody alive. But if you can manage to kill him before you yourself are killed, you're done with this leg, and you're rewarded with 2 items. It made it a lot easier to get the item that you want in this dungeon, because 2 items now drop from each chest. So you don't have to rely on that one item being that one thing you want. You've got twice as many chances. With Cuckoo Lane done, though, that is the end of our 3rd leg of Void Arc, which leaves us with the final boss. This raid is not afraid of putting some nightmare-inducing crap in, let me tell you. The voidsent are a thing. And they don't care about people. You know what we want? Nightmares. That's cool. Now, I'm putting these markers down because nobody ever does, or I was afraid these guys weren't going to. Given how they fared against the Morble. But our final boss here is Echidna. Echidna is actually not that hard a fight. There should really only be one thing in this entire fight that will potentially kill you. A number of attacks that hit the tank only, in fact the one you'll see it readying more often than not, is the one that will hit the tank only. It does, however, have a number of attacks that will hit in an area around it, such as Abyssal Reaper there, and pretty much every attack that Echidna does, Sickle Strike is the tank move, by the way, but just about every attack that Echidna does adds a vulnerability up debuff on you. As long as you handle the mechanics, though, it's not that bad, and generally one will wear off before you get put with another one. So it's not a huge deal, but if you're running around getting hit by everything, you're going to die faster and faster. Now, if the arrows on that were any indication, you're all supposed to crowd into that one. It will actually spread the damage from the attack out amongst everybody in the circle. That was followed by another of Echidna's moves, which was the two very large AoEs on either side with a small strip of safe right in the middle. You should be reasonably near Echidna anyway, and kind of in front and behind it anyway, so it shouldn't be that hard to dodge. But for the most part, that's it. That's like most of the fight right there. Oh yeah, Petrifaction. Because Echidna's middle segment there is a Lamia, a Medusa. And in turn, can use Petrifaction. Keep Echidna focus targeted. When you see it readying Petrifaction, look away. As soon as the cast bar is full, you don't have to wait for the animation, nothing of the sort. As soon as the cast bar is full, you can go back to beating on it again. Now, about a third of the way through the fight, Echidna will split into three: Echidna, Dexter, and Sinister. Dexter and Sinister being two snakes, and then Echidna being the Gorgon body. Now, you saw I focus targeted Echidna as opposed to either of the two snakes. That's because the two snakes themselves don't do anything of too terrible note. However, the closer they are to each other, they do gain a stacking buff that I believe is either damage up or vulnerability down. So you're either going to be doing... They're either going to be doing more damage or you're going to be doing less damage the closer they are to each other. But that's for the most part it, with the two snakes, with Sinister and Dexter. Echidna, on the other hand, will still use Petrifaction. I focus target her, so I can see Petrifaction coming. However, unlike Boss Echidna, small Lamia Echidna can be stunned out of Petrifaction, as well as the Flame Wreath, I think it's called. That is a really large fire AoE that will sit on the field for a while. It can either be stunned or silenced out of using both of them. Now, a little ways into the second part of this, Echidna will spawn two Blood Guards, I should say. These don't do anything that the other Blood Guard didn't do. Honestly, they're not doing anything too fancy. They've got a directional AoE. I've tanked them before. Kill them, then go back to beating on Echidna. These will spawn every time after Echidna splits and then rejoins. And believe it or not, at this point, you've seen pretty much all the mechanics of the fight. Oh yeah, except for this one. This one is not split. I found for that one the best place to stand is not in the very middle, but a little bit off from the middle. I wouldn't run too far out to the edge, though. But as long as you're just a little bit out from the middle, it gives you a pretty good opportunity to run to a safe spot. However, sometimes you'll just be in a bad position. Sometimes you'll just get hit by it. If you are going to get hit by it, at least make an attempt to only get hit by one circle and not overlap. After Echidna splits again, be aware that Lamia Echidna is immediately going to use Petrifaction, so be aware. Also of note this time round, not actually this time round, both times the tanks do not have to worry about who is attacking who. You don't have to worry about the tanks showing up, trying to get hate, fighting for hate as to who's going to get claim on what. The 3 individual ads will pick their target. Each party just needs to run to the A, B, and C marker and wait. The ad will come to them. They actually split up and intentionally go for, I think, a tank from each party. Now, the one thing that will potentially kill the party in this fight is that attack, Gehenna, which also happened the previous time after the 3 segments rejoined. Gehenna's damage is based on one of 2 things. I'm not actually sure which. I believe it's based on how long it takes you to kill all 3 ads, or it may be based on how long it takes just to kill the 2 snakes. I'm not sure, but regardless, if you die to Gehenna, it's because you didn't kill the ads fast enough. You kill them faster, and you won't die to it. Now there you actually saw the circular AoE that everybody was supposed to get in. I was trying to chase after him to get in it, but the idiot just kept running, and at which point I said, okay, if you just want to die. And he died. But that's, for the most part, that's it for the fight, though. The ads will split up, they will pick their own target. If you don't kill them fast enough, Gehenna will wipe you. If you do kill them fast enough, it'll just do a small amount of damage and the fight continues on. 2 blood guards are summoned. Kill them, go back to beating on Echidna. Echidna is going to continue doing her own attacks, which is primarily the single target on the tank, but then there's also the many AoEs you saw there, which you should try not to stand in, but if you have to stand in one, stand in only one of them. Petrifaction is still a thing to be aware of, which you just have to turn away and not be facing her. Simple as that. And that is really it. That's the fight, and that ends Echidna. That also ends Void Arc. So until next time, everyone, Void Arc is super fun. I have a lot of fun doing it. I've done it just for giggles before, because I went, hey, you know what I want to do? Void Arc. And so I did. Until next time, everyone.